Okay, so welcome to this webinar, this classEx webinar on macroeconomics. And maybe at first, for the way to interact today, feel free to unmute and ask questions anytime. If you have more technical questions, I'm very happy that Florian is with us here today, because you see, I tend to be more the lecturer, so I see all these these techniques more from the applied side of what I can do for teaching students, for activating students, for making them think about macroeconomic concepts. And I am not so good in programming. And sometimes some of you might be more into these technical questions and may have a question on, well, is it possible to implement a treatment here to modify the game? And feel free to voice that right away, to address that as you like. If you want to, you can also just ask questions in the chat, and Florian will be around and then may be able to decide right away whether your question can be solved from a technical point of view, or maybe he decides that your question is so good that you should right away address that to the audience. So then he will invite you to do that, or maybe he is able to answer it right away in the chat area. So while I am talking, I won't have a look into the chat, because otherwise I get completely confused with the way with all the stuff I want to say, and at the same time communicate with chat that would overburden me somewhat. So I'm very happy that Florian is supporting us in this respect. Right. Okay. So I guess we're going to have 60 minutes of playing and gaming, and me telling you about macroeconomic games for teaching with classEx. And hopefully we're going to have some discussions later on. Maybe altogether it's going to take 90 minutes, but I would assume it may just be less than that. Let me just share my screen with you. And there you go. So this is what we want to do today: address interactive experiments in the online classroom. So this is part 1B, and you may have attended already last week or the week before, where Marcus had been presenting so some first introductions to the usage of classEx for teaching, and then the advanced part on programming. So today, macroeconomics, and this is just to present the team. Today, Marcus is not with us. He wanted to be around, but he has about the best excuse you can find for not attending, because he's currently in the hospital with his girlfriend, who's giving birth to their joint child. So we hope to get excellent news very quickly from Marcus. Yeah, thanks, Rosie. Yeah, the applause. We will pass that along to Marcus. Okay, so Marcus, he has always been the mastermind in that linked the idea of teaching with all the technicalities and knowing how all the programming should work, and devoting all his time and effort to establishing this public good, which we love all as classEx. I was always the happy one of this relationship, because Marcus developed all that at my chair, and I was always the one who came forward with ideas. So can't you implement this, and this? And he always said, well, yes, sure, I can. So that started about 12 years ago, when I asked him, can you maybe no, I was looking for an online tool to run a simple quiz, and Marcus told me, don't spend all that money, I can program that for you. And the next morning it was done. And then I asked him, two weeks afterwards, Marcus, can we just run some type of a prisoner's dilemma on the web? And he said, well, sure. And the next morning was done. So he was always that genius to bring forward all that. And and that developed more and more, such that you now found this beautiful back end, and you can do all the programming by yourself and invent all types of games. And so for me as the senior partner, it was always I always had the fun of bringing in the didactic idea of activating students, and he the senior genius of bringing all this to life. Well, in fact, maybe I did a little more, because finding a structure that is capable of actually organizing game theory in this type of a tool, of knowing when, what is a stage, what an experiment, what is a role, what is a treatment, and also of bringing this into this current ingenious design in classEx. Maybe I help there a little, but don't overestimate my role. The next one in the team is Susie. She's currently no longer in Passau, but in the University of Cologne, but still part of the team. And Florian, we have him around here today. So he's serving there, and he's now my my junior mastermind. Whenever I know I cannot program the types of games that I would like, then Florian is the expert for that. And we have Stefan, the next one in the row to contribute in this respect. So this is what you know already. Today, part 1B, the experiments in macro. And you see, I have been teaching macro for very, very long time, and also my dissertation was a macroeconomic one, and it took a while actually to bring these two points together, and many of you have a long history of trying to link macro to games, and some of you have then also experienced in linking macro to teaching. And I think this is an absolutely fascinating area. And when I'm talking here today, it's not because I consider myself to be an expert with doing all this, but so maybe I have a very particular approach to teaching macroeconomics, having been the one who was so much involved in classEx. So my task today is just to tell you about the standard games we have developed, and about the experience we have gathered on which are the games that run well. And then it's up to you to decide which of the games might fit into your particular classes and teaching. And when you have a look at the classEx website as a lecturer, and when you go to all the standard games we have in macroeconomics, then you will observe this list here. We have a game on the Keynesian Multiplier, and we're going to play this game today, so I don't have to talk so much about that. We have a coordination game on investment, which basically tells you how investment might be a type of an assurance game, where the equilibrium selection can be a little more complex. And this helps students understand that investment may not necessarily be just a unique equilibrium, and that it can be affected by types of sunspots that so it takes a more behavioral approach to investment levels. And then we have the game on a face beauty contest. I will briefly talk about this today. We have a consumption function on income. I'll touch that briefly. Consumption function savings, I'll cover that as well. We have a very short vignette on Ricardian equivalence, and since I'm not talking about it, let me just briefly address that. It's only hypothetical. It's only a vignette, so it does not contain actual incentives, but it helps people understand how difficult actually the thought of Ricardian equivalence is, and students are separated into two treatments. In one, they are given a transfer by the government that is financed by bonds, and in another one, it's financed by sudden increased revenues by the government. And if you believe in a Ricardian equivalence, the two should make a difference, because when you know that as a taxpayer you must pay for the bonds in the future, you should actually save all the transfer. But basically, the idea of this vignette is just a null result. Students just don't care about this type of issue, whether governments really sort of whether government debt is a burden for future taxpayers. And this null result can help you in a classroom discussion to find out what the logic behind Ricardian equivalence actually is. We have another game, Macroeconomics, as a P=1 beauty contest. This is sort of just an introductory game, because sometimes people don't understand the difference between micro and macro. And just as an introduction, a P=1 beauty contest is one where there are multiple equilibria, where there is an infinite amount of equilibria, and where expectations are the key drivers in the equilibrium selection. And this is sort of a nice game to play in the beginning, because students are suddenly alerted that macroeconomics deals with expectations, that outcomes depend not so much on, or not alone on, optimal individual behavior, but on the interaction with others. And therefore, this can be a nice start just at the first level, at the first course in macroeconomics. Well, next is the Phillips curve. We're going to play the Phillips curve, and I hope you like the game, because we obtained some really astonishing results on that. And for sure, when you're teaching macroeconomics, you will need the Phillips curve at some stage. And now there is so much theory about the Phillips curve. There are so many different approaches, and this is a very simple one, where students are really activated, where they are by themselves producers. Then I'll briefly tell you about an interest rate tender game, about life cycle consumption, about a game that we have there, about Calvo pricing, and what we will actually play today is an exchange rate game with a purchasing power parity. And we have been testing such a game for a very, very long time. And this is the first one that we think really works smoothly. We have a game on time inconsistency and inflation bias and interest rate parity. But sort of, let me address a few questions just quickly. When you want to let your students understand the role of expectations, then you will quickly come up with some Keynesian thought on a beauty contest. But the beauty contest that was described by Keynes is not sort of the P2/3 or the regular beauty contest that we tend to play, but it tends to be something actually about beauty. And for that purpose, Marcus and I invented this game where you see the instructions right here. So you see me here and Marcus down below. And the task is, please choose the two prettiest men among the following 8 faces. The combination of 2 faces that is chosen most often is assigned the title Man of the Year. Of the participants who opted for that pair of faces, 1 participant is determined randomly and earns €2, whatever. You can insert that as you like. And well, when you think about the game, well, I don't know whom you consider to be the prettiest. I assume, well, maybe he is quite handsome, or well, it depends on your taste. And you may also have some some thoughts about what you consider others, the other people in the classroom or in the online audience to consider the most prettiest. And you might then select the prettiest faces in a type of derivative salience, in the sense that you have a sense that others feel probably they like him the most, so I rather pick him as well. But the task suddenly becomes a completely different one, because you see there are two faces that stick out because they are black and white, and they are your lecturers. So this is me and this is Marcus. And now there is a magic to this game, because repeatedly Marcus and I are voted the most pretty man of the year. So we are very proud, but we confess we probably do not deserve this honor. And so why does it come about? And well, the reason is that students engage in a completely different type of expectation formation, sort of what we call a shelling salience. So they don't actually look for the prettiest faces, but they look for the two photos that stick out the most, in order to coordinate with others on selecting these two. So suddenly the task of picking the prettiest faces is a completely different one. And this is very close to the original thought expressed by Keynes, that once expectations sort of becomes in this type of a complex thing, that one does not follow logic anymore, that something else emerges. And so you see Marcus and I, we won by 36.5%, whereas these two really pretty ones, they only got 18.7%. So if you like to play this game, what you can do is you can insert your own pictures here, such that you then deserve the honor of once being the prettiest ones. So for example, this belongs well into a chapter on investment behavior, because Keynes made a reference to investors not only looking at the best investment, sort of purchasing shares of the best companies, or they might take the second step of reasoning of forming beliefs about what all the others consider to be the best companies, or the second step of reasoning of thinking about what others think about others being the best company. But maybe even all this iterative reasoning does not bring about the actual solution, because here it is a completely different logic where expectations should sort of just play crazy in a sense. Okay, so this is a first offer to you, and have a look at the data. And by the way, what you should always know is you might run into problems. For example, you designed the game, but you are not selected as the prettiest pair of lecturers. And suddenly you feel, well, what should I do about that? But you will know that whenever you are in classEx, you can just have a look at all the previous data. And then tell your students, well, I expected you to play the following way. You surprised me, but I can tell you that in previous rounds, in previous experiments, these were the results. And then you just have a look at the previous data, which are stored in the repository, and they are quickly at hand to you. Okay. One thing when you are in a macroeconomics lecture, you might want to explain the different tender procedures of how central banks allocate central bank money. And you will know there are many different styles. There are sort of, in particular, there is when you allocate a fixed amount of central bank money, you would tender this out in a public bidding. And the nice thing is this is precisely what you can do here in this example on the interest rate tender, because we have set up different styles of how your students would engage. So your students would obtain the role of the bank. So here, the central bank, it's the interest rate tender Dutch, which is the single rate tender, and volume 30,000 euros. You as the lecturer, you would be the central bank distributing 30,000 among the participating commercial banks, and each bank can bid up to 5,000 euros, and they bid between 2.2 and 3%, and they would lend out the money to non-banks for 3%. So they would live on the difference. So here, Dutch means all bids are met with a marginal interest rate. And what you would be able to find out with these games is, at first, you determine the allotment volume. So here is 30,000. If you increase that, you will experience that the marginal interest rate is lower. So that is a first simple and intuitive story to tell your students. Because you will always observe that as your students are bidding, you obtain this type of a downward sloping demand curve for your central bank money. And the next thing is you can switch between a Dutch, by the way, down below here, this is Dutch and this is American, a multiple rate tender. And in a multiple rate tender, you would have to pay whatever you bid. So if you bid 3%, then you're paying 3%. If you bid 2.8%, you pay 2.8%. Whereas in the Dutch bidding, you all irrespective of how much you bid of the interest rate, you all pay only the marginal interest rate. But the interesting thing about these bidding procedures is that the Dutch bidding procedure generates the the counterintuitive consequence that people bid up each other because they don't care so much about their own bidding price, and that induces an upward shift of this demand curve. So that is a nice takeaway, and it helps students understand actually the true bidding behavior. Because believe it or not, what you see here is very close to the bidding behavior we see in actual central bank biddings. So it sometimes can help you sort of, in particular, when you reveal some actual bidding curves for central bank biddings, to link that to what your students did. Okay, what else? Well, life cycle consumption. This is probably something more for a course in advanced macroeconomics, but well, it depends on your curriculum. It's a game where which has been taken from Carbone and Duffy, 2014 in a publication. And you are confronted with an income across 10 rounds and a concave utility function, and you will observe that depending on the interest rate, you should smooth consumption, and there should be some upward slope, some upward linear sloping curve for consumption. That is the optimum, and this optimum is very complex to derive. The interesting thing is that students do have a sense of playing that, so such that such an upward sloping consumption curve where they exploit the fact that they are getting interest on whatever they save today and consume tomorrow, that this advantage becomes visible to students. Now we had another trick to the game because we play the game in two treatments, treatment 1 and treatment 2. And the trick is commonly that we don't tell students upfront about that. We just report about the task and tell them, please have a look at your smartphones or at your computers where you find out when exactly you get your income. And then they have to, well, implement the rest. And the interesting thing is this particular treatment here. Here you see the treatments. Participants in treatment 1 got an income of $100 each round. And the second treatment, participants in treatment 2 got an income of $160 in rounds 1 to 5 and no income in rounds 6 to 10. Now, what you may not observe directly is that these two treatments should have no impact on your consumption path. And this is so because given the interest rate of 10%, the present value of the two income streams is just identical, right? So if you were completely rational, there should be no difference here between the treatments. However, you do observe one, and one that is less rational, but more intuitive, because people are responsive to the drop in income in treatment 2. So they suddenly see in round 6, their income is lower, so consumption goes down. In spite of the rational choice where they should completely smooth out these differences in income. So the nice thing about the game is that it can help you activate students to think about rational consumption in response to life cycle income, and at the same time alert them to the complexity of doing this and to the potential failures that students might run into when really trying to look only at life cycle income and sort of some excess weight given to current income.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Just on the last slide. So I always prefer on the last, that one shows also the equilibrium at some point. I don't know. You might not want to show it in the first, very first, but it's interesting to see also the equilibrium, because the equilibrium would be smooth. No, it would be how much would it be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or do you want to ask us how much would it be?
No,
I mean, yeah.
I might. Maybe Rosie, would you have a quick intuition of where the?
I should know it. I should know it. Is it like 80 every period or so? I have no clue. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, what you don't know is the interest rate here.
No, you said 10%. No.
10%, right?
Yeah, you said 10%.
And with the 10 now, and the utility function is a pretty complex thing. But basically, what you would do. By the way, Rosie, there is a second sound in your background.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So what you can infer is that from round to round, you should increase consumption by, grossly speaking, by 10. And since you are since your income across the whole time sort of is limited upwards, you should start somewhere around 60, then 70, then 80, 90, 100. This is about sort of the linear development that will be the equilibrium. Okay? Okay, thanks.
Basically, it's a convex combination of the two. I mean, in the beginning, the treatment 2 does the right thing, but then it drops, obviously.
Yeah.
And treatment 1 does it more or less right in the last periods. No.
Yeah.
So if you take
exactly. I mean, some last round errors there. You always have some students who didn't completely understand, who were a little cautious. So there tends to be a slight bump in the last round. But this is not so so interesting. Right. We have two other games on sort of, if you want to help students understand the Keynesian consumption function, these two types, they are no real games, they are more vignettes in a sense, but with treatments. So if you like that, please have a look at that. You might like the time inconsistency model. So the Kudland-Prescott approach or Barrow approach to time inconsistency and the inflation bias. So if you like that, I have just sort of collected some data from the past. So where you observe, well, you have some announced level of inflation, but you see what people actually then expect you to do is higher level of inflation, and then actual inflation is even higher. Well, I mean the discretionary results in Kudland-Prescott would be more sort of even stronger than that, but the game sort of, this is then a real game between one person acting as a central banker and others acting as the private as the private sector that forms expectations. And sort of the nice thing about the time inconsistency model is that you can train your students in a little in some micro-founded macroeconomic thinking. Maybe it's not so important for actual central banking in practice, but it's again a nice tool for helping students get into some formal micro-founded analysis. What we're not playing today is a game on the interest rate parity. And I must tell you, the interest rate parity, I mean, this is certainly only something for open economy macroeconomics. And we have been trying for years and years to come up with an intuitive method of teaching the interest rate parity. And I must tell you, I was quite frustrated that my students never understood the interest rate parity in a sense that I find convincing, because there are lots of counterintuitive things about the interest rate parity. And we then came up with a type of a complete game changer. Because what we play here is an exponentially growing population of rabbits and fishes. And believe me, this is exactly the interest rate parity, because we have rabbits that grow by 30% across 4 rounds and fishes that grow only by 10% per round. And people can then trade their population. They trade fishes per rabbits, and the question is, which should be the equilibrium price? Because what you should know, fishes and rabbits, at the end of the game, they all earn an income of, I believe, 1 euro cent. So they have the same value in the end. But what should be the equilibrium price in round 1, 2, 3, 4? And that contains a real challenge. And I have beautiful discussions with my students after they played it, and after they found out the errors that they committed, because one tends to think intuitively that the higher growing population becomes more valuable from round to round. But the truth is the opposite is the case. The faster growing rabbits obtain a high advantage in the beginning, and this advantage, this high price that they get, must go down across the rounds. But this is a logic which is the interest rate parity. But students commonly do not understand that. And therefore, please have a look at the game. It's one of our really, really favorite games now. And we in fact, we even run it in advanced courses. So it's not only for the bachelor level, but it would serve there as well, pretty well. But it helps students at any level really understanding this logic. Next one, we have a game on Calvo pricing. And Calvo pricing, for those macroeconomists, well, among you, you certainly know the Calvo 1983 publication, which has become so popular. So thinking about rigidities as being responsible for price inertia and for the forward-looking new Keynesian Phillips curve. But sort of deriving the new Keynesian Phillips curve commonly takes quite some time. But this game helps you understand very quickly why people must be forward-looking when they set prices. So if you are in need of such a game, please have a look at that. Okay, so this was a little my overview of the games that we know so far that work well. Now at the same time, there are still many things in macroeconomics that we don't cover yet. So if you have a sense that, for example, growth theory, we have no game on growth theory. I guess there will be many other chapters in macroeconomics. So I hope to inspire you as well, that if you see something, if you have an idea, or if you have ever run a good game in macro that you would like to see implemented in classEx, please come forward. Rosie, yes.
So yeah, there is a growth model, a very nice growth model. Well, it's also complicated, by Charles Nazaire, which I can bring to your attention. Yeah, I will send it to Marcus. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Great. Okay, what I would like to play with you today at first is a Keynesian multiplier, then a pretty novel game on the Phillips curve, and then we're going to delve into the exchange rate and purchasing power parity. And in order to do so, let me just have a look. No, okay, yeah. I will now open my classEx here, the Keynesian multiplier, and what you will know here, I have the QR codes, and I will just copy the QR code and will send that to you. Sometimes I click here on the chat and it just wouldn't open. Yeah. Okay, I must stop my presentation. No, there it is. Here. Okay. Right. When you now have a look at the chat, you obtain a link, and I go back. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. So when you open the link, it should somehow read like the game hasn't started yet, something like that. Okay. So there are 15 of you currently logged in. 16, okay. Maybe all the other ones. We are 26 currently. So all the other ones, please also log in. So you interact with all participants in this room, in this online room, over 5 rounds. In each round, you choose your consumption. Target for your consumption is to be close to 0.8 times income. Income is determined average of all consumption decisions plus investment. The investment is 100 in all rounds. And today we're going to play for real money. So if you are a lucky one and if you obtain a winner's code, please send me your winner's code by email. I will give you my email address in the end. So you just send it to me by email and I will transfer the money via PayPal. What you need is a PayPal account. But sort of, it's real. So it's real money we're talking about here today. By the way, my experience is that whenever I run simple vignettes and quizzes with students, participation is high. Whenever there is money, there is suddenly an additional 20% of students who are activated, so who then really participate. So I think also for teaching, this is always nice to see that money is quite a motivator here in this respect. So let's go back to the instructions. You choose consumption. If you come very close to the target, you have a good chance of earning €5, and the target is 0.8 times income, and income is the average of all consumption decisions plus investment equal 100. Okay? And now I start and would like you to insert your consumption for round 1. Okay, please 10 seconds and then I will close. Okay, thank you. So when I'm closing now, you see the results and we right away start with the second round. I see there is a question in chat. I don't assume that was realistic. So let us see. Okay, the income was 111 plus 100. So the average consumption was the 111. This plus 100 results in the income of 211. 0.8 times this income is 169. So the one of you who came closest to 169 just won €5. And let us start with the second round. I think second round has already started. Right, so please insert your choice. And 10 seconds, please. Okay, and here we go. Okay, this time average consumption was 173. plus the 100 for investment implies that each of you had an income of 273. And your target consumption, 80% of that is 218. So if you were closest to 218, you just won €5. So please now make up your mind and insert your choice for round 3. And 10 seconds, please. Okay, here we're done. So let us see what the result is. Okay, this time average consumption was 240. Plus the 100 for investment means you all had an income of 340. 80% of that would be 272. So the one of you who came closest to 272 just won €5. Thank you. So please make up your mind and insert your consumption for round 4. So please finish up. Thank you. So this time, the average consumption was 319 plus the 100 for investment implies you had an income of 419, and 80% of that was 335. Okay, 335, the one of you who came close to that just won €5. Now please make up your final choice. Okay, the last one, please now insert, and then we can display all the results. Thank you. So here we go. So in the end, average consumption was 398. That is really beautiful. So thank you so very much. So 398 plus 100 investment means your income was 498. 80% of that is 398. So you suddenly observe that the average consumption is now equal to target consumption, such that you managed across these 5 rounds to approach the equilibrium. Now, we don't have the time to go through all calculations, but I assume some of you would have known what the equilibrium is right away. Is there one of you who would like to speak out?
I certainly was too lazy to calculate it.
Thank you, Rosie. You're just my favorite student. They're all like you. and probably in reality it's no different. So we are all too lazy to calculate our life cycle income and to calculate our retirement savings and all that. And so laziness is probably always a good approach for understanding macroeconomics. But the beauty is that even though you were lazy, you over time approach the equilibrium. So the game can help you understand how over time you can approach equilibrium, although people tend to be lazy when calculating. Now, there might have been some sophisticated players who would have known, well, the task is that I pick consumption, but by 80%, the target consumption that should be identical to my own, such that I should ideally have a consumption 4 times the investment. You can calculate that. And if you are using this material for your lecturing, you will certainly tell people about the equilibrium. But basically, you always find that people don't adhere to the equilibrium, and it's not smart to be too smart, because then you forget about all the other people who do not calculate. And what suddenly emerges is some history dependence here. History dependence in a game where there is no reason for history dependence, because each round has nothing to do with the previous round. There are no savings that are passed on, no consumption that is smooth across time. It's each round is completely separate, and still you find a dependence from one round to the other. And why is that so? This is so because people tend to use the last round's average consumption or the target consumption as a guidance for their next round's choice. And this is then something that in macroeconomics we find as a very particular type of development, which we call the Robertson lag, where people only sort of with a lag infer what their income is likely to be. The beauty of this game is also that it informs students about the complexity in choosing consumption when the consumption choices are made simultaneously. So this simultaneous choice of consumption implies that no one knows the income. And although the actual sort of consumption target is so simple, there is a huge complexity suddenly as a consequence of the interaction here in the game. So now you observe we really rushed through the game. When you do this in the class, you would allow students to, for example, go into breakout sessions to discuss in pairs of 2 up front, maybe in larger groups of 4 to discuss how an optimal choice would be like. So you wouldn't rush through this in the way I just did it. So I hope you understand and you take my excuse for being so quick here and for being such a bad teacher. I'm not teaching you macroeconomics. I'm only sort of giving you some inspiration of what these games might be like. But sort of, yeah, students would need much, much more time. Just a quick question, Florian, there are some chats. Is there anything that I should address?
No, it's just about how many people choose the equilibrium and how much they entered.
Okay, right, yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I see you feel the urge to now find out what all the others did. And this is then certainly a success of the game if students continue talking about that to find out how their choice compares to that of the others. Okay, so it's a game that we have played for many, many years now. And you see when you just look at the previous results, how often this is played. Here it's even in a principles micro course in Connecticut. Marcus played it. I played it in May and had 535 participants. So the nice thing is that when you have so many participants, this is a real macro economy. So with 500, we are really close to a huge society that interacts. And the nice thing is that classEx works beautifully with that. So there are no congestion problems. Right. Okay, I have another game. So go here, the Phillips curve. Okay. Here you see the game on the Phillips curve. Okay. Now this time you are each in the role of a producer, and you can make a profit by choosing the price P appropriately. The demand Y for each producer is Y equal to omega minus P. Thus, the lower the price chosen, the higher the demand Y. It increases with the exogenous influence omega, which indicates the maximum possible demand at a price P equal to 0. Each participant automatically produces a quantity equal to the demand. The capital P is the average of prices chosen by all participants. This determines the costs and is necessarily unknown at the beginning of a round. The unit costs are capital P minus 10, and costs for the entire production are Y times capital P minus 10. The game is played for 12 rounds. In the first 6 rounds, omega is equal to 30. In the round 7 to 12, omega is equal to 50. Now it says two, oh yeah, it is, 2 participants are drawn at random for the payout. So, and in fact, I think you can really earn some money this time. So just to illustrate, you have this demand function in the beginning from 30 to 30. You have this cost function, but you currently don't know at what level this is, because this depends on the average price chosen by all the others, minus 10. So you can then derive the profit per unit, which is the height of this rectangle, and your production will be automatically chosen when you choose this price. Then this is demand, and you automatically produce accordingly, and so this would then be production. And I give you as my students the following hint: a high profit is achieved when production and profit per unit do not differ greatly. So you don't want this rectangle to be too flat or too thin, but rather shaped as a square. So that is my hint to you. Okay? Right. Having said this, let me start right away. How many are logged in? Oh, I currently don't see this. No worries about that. So we're starting. Please insert your price. Okay, 10 seconds, please.
While we are waiting, is it possible to ask a question?
Okay, yes.
Yeah. My name is Natalia. What is the intuition behind having cost depend on price? That cost is price minus 10.
Okay, yeah.
Like how
thanks.
does it relate to the real world? Yeah.
Yeah, it does relate to the real world in the following sense. Assume all the other producers supplying inputs to your production as workers or as suppliers. They have some intermediate material and they're supplying this to you. So their price then has this effect on your costs. And similarly, you would be supplying your product to all the other ones.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. This is a point that I missed. Okay, I think we are done. You all have decided. So at first I give you the feedback. And what you see here, the mean price is 18. Right? The mean price is 18, and right away you can now enter the second round, having learned a little about the prices of all the others. And please 10 seconds. Okay, thank you. We're all done. And here you get the feedback. Again, the mean price is 18. Thank you. No change to this. So please make your choice in the third round. And 10 seconds, please. And there we go. Here is feedback. And again, the mean price is 18. You are very stable. You are just happy with the 18. Very, very nice to see. So please choose now for round 4. So 10 seconds, please. Okay, so let's close round 4 and to see, oh, the mean price has increased to 19. So please make your choice for round 5. And 10 seconds, please. And we are closing round 5. And we get, yes, the mean price is still 19. Thank you so much. Please, round 6. Okay, I think we're done. So here is now feedback on round 6, and oh, the price has increased to 20. Now, please, for round 7, be very attentive, because you are now confronted with a shock. The demand, the omega, increases from 30 to 50. So take your time, calculate, and see how you would like to respond.
Excuse me, how does this shock is introduced? To what? To the demand, or?
Yes, to the demand. So previously you had your demand equal to 30 minus P. Now it is 50 minus P.
DNA-Schäden, Änderung vom Blutbild.
Okay, I see 12 of you have decided. Please, the other ones come to a choice. 16, okay. Now we're waiting for the last 2. For the last, please insert your price. Right? Okay. Maybe the last one is still uncertain. No, there it is. Yeah. Okay, great. So what is it? Oh, right. The mean price has increased to 31. That is really, really interesting. And now you see how the price has increased, how your costs have consequently increased. And you can now reconsider your choice for the next round, round 8. Please come up with your price. And 10 seconds. And here we are closing round 8 and move on. The price has now increased to 34. Thank you so much. Please, round 9, insert your price. And 10 seconds. Thank you. So feedback to round 9. Price has increased to 36. Now please make your choice for round 10. And please 10 seconds. There we go. And we are closing round 10. The price has increased to 39. Please choose your price for round 11. And 10 seconds. Thank you. And we're closing round 10. Now the mean price has increased to 41. So this is the final round. Please insert your final price. And 10 seconds. Okay. So let me give you the feedback on round 12. And the mean price is back again to 39. So thanks a lot for playing so beautifully. I will now display the results and disperse the payoffs. Here we go. So at first, what you see here is the price, and you see, well, you were barely below 20, and then over time you approach the 40. And what does that imply for the quantity? Well, the quantity was close to around 10, and then it jumped up to close to 20 to then go back to 10. Now, when you think about this for a while, you will find there is some beauty in this game. And I must tell you, currently this is one of my really favorite games because it's absolutely fascinating. When you play the game and you are confronted with a shock, you see a sense that that you should increase your price in response to the shock. But you commonly have the intuition that you should not increase your price by the same amount as the shock. The increase from 30 to 50 commonly would not induce you to raise your price by 20, because higher demand may, in your intuition, be something that should also induce higher production. And in fact, this is then observed, but not in the long run. In the long run, production stays constant. Now, what you can calculate pretty easily is that your equilibrium production should always be 10, and that the demand shock should have no impact on the quantity that you produce. And this is so because any demand shock induces you to raise your price, but induces all the others to raise their price as well, which increases your cost. Once you see that your costs increase, you are pressured to pass on these costs into a further increase of your price. But this then ends up to be a circle where the increased prices translate to increased costs, which translate to increased prices. And this, by help of iterative reasoning, you could have observed upfront that you should increase your price by 20. Right away, go to the 40. But this is not what the intuition tells you. The intuition tells you, well, adjust prices a little. Let quantities respond as well. So it takes then 5 rounds for you to observe that the shock is actually a global shock, is an aggregate shock that induces all to let that quantity stay where it was previously. Now, what you see then is the long run Phillips curve. Now, in this game, still with the price, not the inflation rate on the y-axis. But what you see is there is this long-term Phillips curve, which tells you, let production be constant. And at the same time, there's this short-run Phillips curve, which tells you when demand goes up, when people have a higher willingness to pay for your product, then increase your quantity. Respond to this not purely by raising the price. So this is then overall the beauty of the game, because you can activate students in thinking as a producer. And in fact, you don't need many assumptions. You don't need assumptions of limited information, for example. You don't even need any rigidities. You don't have to pressure them into complexities in order to make sure that their level of rationality is limited. Already in this simple game, the rationality is limited to an extent that your subjects will not engage in this higher order reasoning of knowing that others know that prices will go all the way up. They will simply not do that. But already in this game, the reasoning is limited such that what emerges out of that, purely out of that, is the short-run Phillips curve. Okay? Now I see I was talking so much all the time, and we had so much fun with the games. I suggest we cannot run the last game, but I would just like to briefly address that. The last game, the exchange rate and purchasing power parity. In fact, this game would take a little more time to play, but the nice thing is the exchange rate is determined completely endogenously by having some participants living in the Eurozone and selling cars and purchasing soybeans, and others living in the United States and purchasing cars and selling soybeans. And all of them have their minimum costs and maximum valuation, and they would infer from this just the prices they would like to set. And then there is an order book in 2 countries, and there is a very well thought through algorithm which determines the exchange rate based on these 2 order books. And that's the whole magic. And the beauty of that is that we have parameters here in the game which allow you to now introduce some inflation. And when there is suddenly inflation, the consequence is that in one country, the valuations, sort of in dollars, for example, the valuation in dollars would go up, and the minimum costs in dollars would also go up due to inflation. And then the beauty of the game is that purchasing power parity emerges just as a consequence of that. Not because anybody has ever thought through purchasing power parity, but you just see that inflation differentials impact on the exchange rate that is the consequence of this game. So if you like that game, give it a try with your students. And I think I should stop here with the games and the presentations and invite you to address some questions about our experience or suggestions for the future.
So I found that very interesting. I was especially playing a game where you just have very limited information. So, I mean, in general, I think it's I would add, but more to the graphs. Yeah, so I suggested in the chat that one should give some standard deviations, and then you can also tell the students whether the variance over time increases or decreases. Yeah, so give the mean and the standard deviation or some measure of variance. And yeah.
Okay. Now, what I can tell you is the game, for example, on the Phillips curve. We played it last year with simultaneously 500 students in the classroom, and heterogeneity was very high. So even across time, there were lots of students who did not pick the price 40, but which stayed at 30, which stayed even below, and some with extremely high prices. So there is substantial heterogeneity. I think for me, this is always a magic that on average, the data are as beautiful as they are. And the way you played it today was exactly the way my students played it last year when they were in a huge cohort of 500. So this is a game where you can be pretty certain that when you play it, students will deliver the same consequences. Now, I would not, what you can always do as a lecturer is, after playing the game, retrieve all the data and have a look at standard deviations, heterogeneity, and all that. For me as a lecturer, I think it is nice to have a very simple graph afterwards. And I always try to keep the graphs as simple as possible, because quite honestly, when I'm running the experiment, I tend to be a bit distracted, a bit nervous, a bit, I don't know, there are so many things I have to do at the same time. Think about the formal solution, think about whether my students just understood me, whether the technical stuff is working, and then I'm having the graph. And suddenly, if there is too much on that, I personally feel overburdened by that. And therefore, currently, we don't have it there. And I sort of also telling my students about the average only gives me a clear punchline. And then talking about heterogeneity is a pretty hard thing. So, but if you feel you need that, I would rather suggest have a look at the data afterwards, and then think through a very good strategy of addressing this heterogeneity in front of your classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. But it's good to think about that. Also, sometimes I think our graphics might be overly complex, and I'm always in favor of having graphs as simple as possible. So please, further ideas and comments. If you don't have ideas on the current games, maybe you have ideas on other games, or maybe you have run a game in macro that you feel that we should include in the future.
So I have a question. I have so you see, like even in this game, yes, especially in the first one, yes, so people presumably have like all tools to calculate the optimal solution, but we were so far from the equilibrium that it was, I don't know, to a certain extent, kind of, well, I guess understandable, but also upsetting, yes, that we were like about 100, yes, whereas supposed to be something 400. And so how to reconcile it? So one possibility that some of the students will be trying to be like good economists, yes, and trying to calculate it, but at the same time, that may not be the optimal, because if majority are kind of just picking up the number and looking at like 100, yes, to a certain extent is a reference number. I know it's absolutely unrelated, yes, that you would add to consumption plus 100, yes, absolutely unrelated, but most people probably pick that because like thinking that, oh, maybe it's like will be somewhere there. So how do you explain good students how to play this game to be closer to what people will win, because you have so much uncertainty, because you really don't know how many people will be playing for like good economists and how many people will be playing as just thinking. So what type of conversations do you have with your students?
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. I think this is a crucial question, because although from a micro-founded perspective, you would say we have the solution. And if you were a true believer in micro-founded macroeconomics, your story would end right there. There is the solution. And now suddenly you play the game and observe there is something different, and you say there is uncertainty. Quite right. And the uncertainty is you just don't know how smart all the others are. So this is your uncertainty. And the nice thing is this is a type of uncertainty that we might, as if we are more behaviorally oriented, this is the type of uncertainty we consider to be relevant for macroeconomics. And whenever there is a macroeconomic problem, we have the sense that we just don't know how many people will calculate that through perfectly. And we're living with this uncertainty. And the consequence then is that you have a different approach to macroeconomics, which is more history dependent. So in face of uncertainty, people put a particular weight to their experience, to what they had in the past. And this history dependence is then sort of a second viewpoint on macroeconomics that is relevant. And I think it's helpful for students to then know that they need both. They need the micro foundation to know what they're talking about, and then they need some common sense of knowing how history dependent people's choices very often are.
But I think like what is also more important, yes, so for life, so we try to impart on the students that being rational, making rational decisions is very important, but at the same time, if everybody else is choosing something different, then you are better off. It's more like philosophical question, like do we actually need economics for life, or do we have to have it as a just or something that we study in the classroom and then we are getting your diploma and then you are good to go and then you can totally forget about it.
You're right. I think this is somewhat philosophical, but by integrating those things, you are also very practical, because you alert people that sometimes you must work with data, you must work with historical data. And a good guess is always that people do both. They calculate forward-looking, rational, and you always have a good amount of people who don't do that, who are sort of completely adaptive. And that when you are a good macroeconomist, that you must get a feeling for your data in order to sort of be better in forecasting, and not the purely micro-founded macroeconomist.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Natalia. Thanks for the question, because I think this is exactly the crucial point for good macroeconomics. Okay, any further questions here? I don't see any further questions, and I think our 90 minutes are perfectly over. So I would suggest, Florian, is there anything from your side, anything that you wanted to add, or any chats that we addressed that you had to deal with?
No, I think there's nothing more. Just yeah, one little piece of information. If you are programming an experiment in classEx and you have any questions, feel free to address me or Markus or Stefan. Just send us an email to our classEx info email address, and we will try to help you. Or there is also a forum where you can post questions.
Okay, so then thanks a lot to all the participants. If you want money, by the way, I should give you my email address. Just don't forget about that. Here it is. Just a second.
So do you know our names and together with the choices, or is it anonymous?
It's completely anonymous. The only thing is you get a winning code. If at one of these games you were selected at random, or if you were the best, then you got a winning code. So you just send me the winning code, and that's all you need. Right? So completely anonymous, but well incentivized. Okay.
Did we know
Thanks
that
a lot.
at the beginning? Did you say that in the beginning?
I may have forgotten, so thanks for for reminding me. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.